So we're going to move straight into a panel discussion. Starting all the way on the left hand side there, we have Ms. Glynis Alexander-Tam, GM InfoLinx Service Limited, where she serves as General Manager of InfoLinx, a position held for the last 10 years. InfoLinx is the owner of the Lynx brand of debt payment services and manages the electronic debt payment network in Trinidad and Tobago. Prior to joining InfoLinx, she worked with the ICT sector as Technical Director and Project Manager for ICT projects, both locally and regionally, for several years. Mrs. Alexander-Tam holds a bachelor's degree in physics, master's degree in electronics and instrumentation, both from UE St. Augustine campus, and an MBA in marketing attained from the Lockjack Graduate School of Business. A certified Institute PMI. Yeah, she has that classification as well. She's currently chairperson of the e-Business Roundtable, a public-private partnership advisory committee to the government. And Ms. Alexander-Tam, this is her second time appearing at this conference. She graced us with her presence last year. In the middle there, we have Mr. Jason Julien, Deputy CEO of First Citizen Bank. Mr. Julien is a chartered financial analyst with over 20 years experience in the financial services industry. He's a holder of a BSc in Management Studies with honors from the University of the West Indies and an MBA from Edinburgh School of Business. His career has covered consultancy with PricewaterhouseCoopers and management positions in an international bank. He was also employed with one of the largest financial services conglomerates in the Caribbean, where he managed over $8 billion in assets. And he's also a faculty member at the Lockjack Graduate School of Business. He was one of my lecturers. Anyway, so guys, this is the whole purpose of this conference. We have, as Dr. Prince mentioned, innovation. Innovation is there. Innovation is out there. We're seeing things in other markets that we desire. We're seeing a need for our entrepreneurs to get systems in place to respond to their needs to receive payment. Traditionally, we think of the banking sector as being a slow-moving entity to respond to these challenges coming from the tech industry and the emergence of this whole concept of Fintech, where we have new competition in the financial services area. What are your thoughts, Jason, on first Minister Nicholas' speech on that potential market that is out there, and the need to look at the products and services that we place to this market, and I would go further to say you need to monetize and have those producers of digital goods receive payments. Let's try that.
Hi, good day. Okay. Hi, good day, everyone. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the panel. The challenge would be in the bank on the panel is, we become the bad guy. All right? So let me start by addressing one of the opening comments that Minister Nicholas made, and I think he hit the nail on the head in terms of tone, and I'm going to borrow your quotation. He started off by saying, the greatest challenge may not be an ICT challenge in participation in the digital financial services space. And I think that is the truth. I think technology exists. The reality for us is that the technology exists to solve all of the problems that are before us. So technology is not the issue. I think what we need to appreciate is that going beyond the technology, there are other factors and considerations and constraints which handcuff us at times, which slow progress at times, and which affect our evolution as an economy and as a system. So let me, before I get into the constraints, I think you asked a specific question about the some of the things mentioned. I want to share a story, and you talked about the diaspora and the size of the market of the diaspora. And actually how I see it is that I don't view our offerings here in the Caribbean as having access to the diaspora alone. I think the way I see it is the world is now such a small space. And it's a small world after all. And the mere fact that we are impacted by things which happen thousands of miles away, not just in the digital space, but across the economy, is a reflection of the world in which we live in today. So we turn on the news at night, and things which happen in countries we've never even seen or visited or touched impact us right here at home in ways which we can't even yet imagine, directly and indirectly. So the world is definitely a small place after all. And the way I see it is that what digital technology offers us is an avenue and a portal and a channel to access a fraction of a market, which is multiple times the size of our own home economies. And to me, that's the opportunity. That if we're able to just get the access and get the access right, and you pointed out a couple of constraints that if we can't even deliver from Port of Spain to San Fernando, I don't know how we're delivering from Port of Spain to Sao Paulo. So there are things which go beyond just the technology that will impact how we are effective as a digital economy and a digital offering. So there's a little story I saw the other day, and I was on a panel just like this, and I really can't remember what it was for. But the story that I took away though is what is much more important. So one of the stories that came out of being on that panel was there was this student. He was of the diaspora, and he was based in North Carolina. And every time he came back home from his studies, the breaks in the semester, his grandmother used to pack him up with pepper sauce.
There you go.
Yeah. And he took the pepper sauce, stuck it in his suitcase, jumped on his plane, went back to school, and he took it out and he flavored his food and he shared it with his roommate, and people liked it. And then the next time he went back home, he came back with more pepper sauce. And of course, being a student, he has no income and he has expenses. So he started to sell some of this pepper sauce. And he found an economy. But what he realized was that this was a business. This was the seeds of entrepreneurship. But he didn't know how to make pepper sauce. But there was a market. So this is what he did. And this is where the technology marries the opportunity. So he is an engineering student that has no clue how to make this amazing pepper sauce that people seem to like, but Granny does. And he's an engineering student who has no capital and no income. So what he did is that he went back home with a camera, and I'm sure he just used his phone, and he started to film Trinidad and tell the story of Trinidad and Tobago, not in the context of the ingredients. We didn't talk about the flavor of the pepper sauce. He talked about the elements that helped to create this amazing pepper sauce. And he talked about the sun and the sea and the sand. He talked about carnival. He talked about the excitement of the people. And he created a story that went beyond the flavor of the pepper sauce, so that the brand of the pepper sauce was more than just flavor. It became everything else that make us, the Caribbean, special and unique. That to someone beyond us and who has never seen the Caribbean, it became exciting, right? What he did as well, he went into Granny's kitchen, not a studio, her kitchen. So Granny in her nightgown, stirring an enamel pot with an old pot spoon with a crack on the wall and paint peeling. He filmed that. I said, this is where the pepper sauce coming from. Not a factory, but the special artisan, homemade, authentic flavor that you're tasting in that bottle of pepper sauce comes from this room. And he put all of this up on our website. Maybe he doesn't know how to make the pepper sauce. He took a picture of the field the peppers are grown, and he told this whole story about when you buy this bottle of pepper sauce, you're getting sun and sea and sand and music and carnival and Granny in that bottle. And what he did is he sold the story, and being the smart kid that he is, he also sold virtual hugs from Granny. You pay $1 for it. So for every $1, you send $1 for him and you get a virtual hug from Granny. I have no idea, but people seem to buy into it, and besides selling bottles of pepper sauce, people buying virtual hugs, which clearly there's a market for everything Caribbean out there, right? Yeah. Right. But the moral of the story is this. You're right, that there is a mechanism and market beyond our shores that we ourselves, if we spend a little time using our imagination and creativity, which I know we have, we can find a way to access it. And the bottom line for this young man is that he raised, I think his target was like $15,000 US, because he wants to get enough capital to bottle a couple, to give Granny enough capital to build out a nice little continuous inventory he could sell and to distribute and label. I think he ended up getting 30,000, so twice his target. And this is through crowdsourcing, which you all must be familiar as, given the theme of the conference, right? So the moral story is this, that I agree that from an opportunity, there is opportunity. And there's a way to marry the technology to access that opportunity. My friend here touch upon some other things which will lead us into the constraints. But I'm not sure, so I'm going to stop there for now, and we're going to come back. At Beanie Bank, I know I'm going to get all the tough questions, but I wanted to say that I agree fully that there is opportunity, but I want to end my comment by saying that the constraints which we have to talk about have nothing to do with the technology, but many other things which affect us implementing technology in the way we would like. Yes.
And let's jump straight into that the constraints themselves. We often hear of entrepreneurs trying to establish a business like Robert, complaining about the mechanisms to receive payment, using these types of workarounds that Robert explored, rather than take out a local merchant account because it's too costly or it's too cumbersome, too clunky. How do we overcome that, Glynis? How do we become more responsive to the needs of our entrepreneurs to receive payments?
Shiva, that is work in progress. Really it is. Because at the end of the day, the financial systems that exist in Trinidad touch globally. And having been in this business for a while, you start to realize that, and one of the speakers said it this morning, it's more than us. There's something called compliance that is big in the finance world, and it's a global touch. Yes, we want to be agile. Yes, we want to be quick on the draw. But the global touch is a constraint we have to deal with as a financial, within the financial sector. And I always, when people talk about we need to be fast moving, I always bring them back and why the regulators are doing what they're supposed to do, because everybody wants to knock the regulators, the central banks, so they're so slow and whatnot. And then I remind them of CLICO, right? CLICO, entrepreneurial, serving their customers, trying to be innovative, and then we all know what happened. And the question was, why didn't the central bank see this coming, right? We have to balance the entrepreneurial with the compliance issues, because it becomes global, and the reality is there is the threat, again spoke of this morning, of de-risking and the threat of blacklisting, right? So to move forward, one, we have to understand the balance, and two, there has to be a lot of collaboration amongst the financial institutions and the networks. And I talk from my example. With Linx, as for those, I'm sure most of you know Linx is the debit switch. We touch the major financial institutions in Trinidad and Tobago, and a credit union and some of the smaller banks, right? I have no doubt there are a lot of our population is technology savvy. When we look at the transactions that go over our networks, we see, and it's just Linx alone, we see close to 40 million transactions a year. And if we extrapolate that to the banks, because we see about 35%, you're talking about 100 million, probably 150 million transactions in Trinidad and Tobago. Billions of values crossing. All right, so people are swiping, and that's just debit. We're not talking credit. All right, so people are swiping, people understand, people want to use it. All right, no doubt about it. There will be the next level. People talk about, because a lot of Trinidadians are online shopping. We get stick with a 7% because of that, right? And it's growing. We did focus groups. As far as people are concerned, the next wave is from Linx debit to credit card swiping. People want to do it. But it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost. You're touching global networks, right? We over the years have seen other people through our doors because they understand that Linx are touching the banks. Everybody wants to come and work with Linx. No problem. But there are regulations, there are compliance issues. There's brand reputational issues in terms of protecting the networks, protecting the brands, etc. And a lot of that is about compliance, right? For us to move forward, there have to be partnerships. There has to be partnerships. We're seeing in the global world, all of those multinational networks buying up small fintech companies. They know what's coming, right? And subsuming them within their organizations because they understand the millennials. They understand that discussion. They understand they want it now, okay? In the Caribbean, we have to do the same thing. We have to collaborate. We have to balance that compliance and regulations with the entrepreneurship because we cannot stop that because that is the next. If we want to diversify, that small and micro, that is where our diversification is coming in. It's not going to be some big next, like how we have oil and gas now, some other big product. It is the small and micro enterprise that's going to move our small open economies forward, right? And that needs the financial innovations to help them. But we have to understand the compliance issues because it's a global touch.
Sure. Minister Nicholas, respond.
The issue of compliance and the way that the banks look at the particular challenges that we have in the economy is understandable. But I think my colleague here, right beside me, anticipates that there has to be some fire thrown at the banks. The commercial banks in the Caribbean, and I will quote and channel a former Prime Minister of Antigua, the Honorable Lester Bird, when he once said that the private sector in the Caribbean is moribund. At that time, I was not involved in government and I was not involved in politics, and I could not understand until I walked in his shoes. The commercial banks in the Caribbean are liquid, yet still, in many of these English-speaking Caribbean islands, there is the whole question of credit. It's not available to the small to medium enterprise. In many instances, it's probably easier for persons to be able to acquire citizenship in the United States than to be able to open an account at a commercial bank in these Caribbean shores. These are some of the realities that small businesses have to recognize. And even in our respective chambers of commerce in the Caribbean, the banks take an attitude, well, you know, Royal Bank, for example, forgive me for calling the name, literally said within the OECS, we don't want to have these small businesses. So they've begun to charge them high transaction rates to get people to leave their banks. I mean, what are we saying? Are we a part of the whole Caribbean experience? So if we know from the time of Adam Smith that small to medium enterprises are the ones that generate the most important growth curves in economies, why aren't the banks taking a different approach towards participation? Why aren't we having more conversation with the banks about setting up venture capital funds, supporting that? Why aren't there more business incubators like Eye to Eye that the banks themselves would support, knowing that these are future entrepreneurs, that they're going to bring more businesses and more revenues to them? So yes, my colleague, there are issues here that the banks must be of concern. But in the whole question of understanding what we have to do, I think our innovators must feel comfortable that there is an escalator, a ramp, upon which they can enter with a good idea. Someone would listen. They are going to be able to raise monies to be able to put the ideas into practice. We also know that the technology allows us to have a much larger market space. We're not dealing with hundreds of thousands now of potential customers. We have to begin to reconceptualize ourselves and dress ourselves, to use a military term, to the new global economy. And the technology affords us and allows us that.
Jason, you kind of take us off all the first round, so give you the opportunity to respond now.
Sure, no problem. So there are a couple of issues tied up in what we've heard thus far, right? Before I get into some of the responses to Minister Nicholas, this is a moment to piggyback off of some of the earlier comments from my colleague, just so we could appreciate and emphasize the compliance issue. We don't create the regulation that speaks to compliance. We unfortunately have to live by it. So from a banking system point of view, my colleague is very right in that we have to deal with and abide by with the penalties that hang over our heads when it comes to correspondent banking, which basically is moving money overseas and back and forth, when it comes to global compliance requirements, and when it comes to regulation. We are abiders of the law. We are not creators of the law. Like it, don't like it, we don't have a choice in the matter. So the world, unfortunately, has become such a place where there's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism, right? Counter-terrorism financing requirements, which we unfortunately must abide by, and there's significant consequences not only to the institution but to the jurisdiction if we don't abide by the rules. And those are facts of life, which unfortunately I don't think anyone in this room could do anything about. So I want to put out on the table, first of all, just emphasize and re-emphasize that these are things which we must live by, and I go back to your first comment, which are things which have nothing to do with technology, which will impact what we do in the digital financial space. So that said, let me go to your recent comments. So I think there is a significant recognition by us all that you're right. When it comes to SMEs, the reality for you're right, I'm glad the fact that you quoted Adam Smith. The reality is that one true test of the health of any economy is the number of entrepreneurs that you have and the number of SMEs that you have, especially in the context of as job creators, growth of the economy, etc. When it comes to tying that issue to funding and capital, we need to understand a couple of things. So the banks, of course, get pointed out because of the nature of our economies. So our economies, we are very bank-centric, meaning that most of the capital in the financial system sits in the banks. That's a fact. But as a fact and a feature and a characteristics of the Caribbean. In more developed markets, the dynamics are slightly different, and also the way funding for entrepreneurship is slightly different. So just taking one step back, when you look at how avenues for funding, there are different mechanisms by which entrepreneurs could receive funding, right? But before I go into them, let me just point out one thing. Even though you see the banks having lots of capital, the capital is not the banks, right? So just remember what a bank is, right? So a bank is an institution that takes people's deposits, so your salary, your savings. We are custodians of that. We aren't owners of it, so it's not mine. We are custodians of it. So we are entrusted with making sure that when you come to use the ATM, when you check your bank balance, when you need to access your savings, it is there. And that really is what the system is built upon, that we are custodians. We protect your savings and investments, and we make sure that it's there when you need to access it. So just bear with me. I'm not sure if the gentleman has a question. So let me tie that now in terms of the funding for entrepreneurship.
Credit.
Oh, for credit first, right? So let me talk about credit and funding, because it's two different perspectives, right? When it comes to credit, it ties back now in terms of the credit policies and risk management of the institutions. Different institutions would have different risk appetites. The reality is most banks are fairly onerous. Yeah, the banks aren't friendly places. When it comes to borrow money, they ask you for everything except your firstborn child, and they make it quite difficult. So I laughed at your comment because, unfortunately, the reality is there is a little bit of truth in it. Where you see the difference is, as you look right now, there's a lot of liquidity in the banking system, and you're right. So if you open, I guarantee you, open any newspapers today, every bank is going to have an ad in the papers, and we're going to ask you to do 2 things or 3 things. Come and get a credit card, come and get a car loan, come and get a mortgage. That's a fact, right? Because those are the things which we understand very easily and we could digest from a risk management point of view, and we could execute quite well. And you as a consumer, we could price very neatly. What is way more difficult from a risk management, pricing, and credit understanding are the complexities of different entrepreneurs, because you're not all the same. When it comes to residential property, there's enough history and parameters that we could get our minds around it. When it comes to cars, there's enough simplicity in terms of the car market that it's easy to price. When it comes to credit cards, same thing. What makes it difficult is the complexity that each unique individual brings to the table as an entrepreneur. Each entrepreneur is not the same. So if one guy is going to sell pepper sauce, another guy is going to have an app, a third guy is going to want to start a small business selling gyros. Each one is different, and therefore each one cannot be treated with one same broad brush and has to be treated on the credit of the particular case. No, I completely appreciate the fact that banks, unfortunately, veer towards the conservative, especially in the Caribbean. And that has helped us at times. If you rewind to the 2007, 2006, and 2008, in the global financial crisis, and you look at the Caribbean banking system, there are very few, if any, and when some jurisdictions had it a little worse, of course, there are very few banks that failed as a result of the global financial crisis. If you look externally in more developed markets, in Europe, in the United States, they were failures. Banks have disappeared, and then because of the different credit practices. So, unfortunately, there are pros and cons which come to how the banks have been set up in the Caribbean. The banks could do a way better job in terms of how you review entrepreneurial credit. And I think that's a learning curve that we all have to kind of get up together. But credit is not the only way to fund an entrepreneurial business. Your second comment was about funding and venture capital funds, and I want to get into that. So I am a huge fan and proponent of having venture capital funding. I actually used to sit on some venture capital boards. The challenge is we don't like to take risk in the Caribbean, and that's not the bank, that's the individual as well too. You look at the stock market, you look at, if I survey this room, I go on Independence Square and ask the average individual that is working, what is your ideal investment? You know what they're going to tell me? I want the highest returns and I don't want to lose my money. Yeah? So how do you tie that attitude towards investing and taking risk to venture capital funding where an entrepreneur could lose all his money? And what is the return that that investor is going to get? So it's not a simple issue. So this is not a bank issue. This is a cultural appetite issue. Right? What types of risks do we like to take? So we have to get our minds around that as well. We love government bonds. We love our money in the bank, and that's why the bank is so liquid. Right? We don't pay much on their deposits. But it's risk and return. So I'm helping us understand that the issue isn't we get singled out because we are the most visible portion of this financial system, but we are not the only portion of the financial system. I think there's a significant need for venture capital funding in the Caribbean, and we've tried. So if you rewind the history of the Caribbean financial markets, we have tried venture capital, especially in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not as familiar with other markets other than Jamaica. Jamaica I'm familiar with. And if you look at Jamaica versus Trinidad, the attitude towards risk is extremely different. The Jamaicans take a lot more risk because I guess they've been through a lot more risk and survived. Hurricanes, financial crisis, etc., etc. They have a whole different perspective on how to approach a risk situation. And that's just reality. So I think there's a need for venture capital funding. Is the source of that funding the banking system? That's a question mark. Because it goes back to, it's not my money. Is a depositor's money. But there is a need for a mechanism in the capital structure to fund, right? So I know the MC mentioned the fact that I lecture at times. And you know, in financial theory, you're taught that there's equity and there's debt. The credit part is debt, you borrow money. But sometimes an entrepreneur doesn't need a loan. Sometimes an entrepreneur needs equity, meaning that someone to take that risk with him. If you look at the story of Facebook and other social media apps that have now very successful, they did not start off by borrowing money from the bank. They started off by angel investors. They started off by going to venture capital funds who helped them through that journey till they were proven and bankable to then have a conversation with the other TF capital and then have a conversation with a bank. And that is how, unfortunately, that's how evolution takes place from a business at a certain point in its life cycle to it getting up the curve to another portion of its life cycle. Now, I think we certainly as a system have to have a conversation about how we fix that gap. But I think there's a gap. So the banks have lots of capital, yes, but there's a gap. There is a gap in the system in terms of treating with that risk portion of capital where an investor, be it family or friends or angel or venture fund, is willing to take a risk and willing to lose the money for return. Yeah?
All right. So as far as I'm concerned, this first session has been a success because we covered all the areas I wanted to cover. We actually trying to make up some time from the robust opening that we had. So I'm going to go straight into Q&A. Yeah, Nigel, I think I saw your hand up even before the presenters were finished talking. Burning question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nigel Casimir from the CTU. Well, but in the late 90s, I was at the local telco here, trying to set up an online storefront thing, and ran into the issue about merchant accounts and so on. And we had to explore going offshore. We are here 20 years later and hearing an entrepreneur extolling the same sort of issues, right? So my question is where is the will to deal with this issue, right? We talk about, I hear everything about the venture capital and this and that, but this is an operational issue.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of the type of entrepreneur it is, all they want to do is take money from the customer, allow the customer to pay them for the service, right? So in the past with Links, the banks got together, the local banks got together and formed this company so that they could do interbank debit transactions. Hugely successful, right? Is there a will within the local banks, within the local bankers association, the e-business roundtable and so on, to recognize that for decades now we've been trying to deal with this problem, right? And what are the banks doing to deal with what is ultimately an operational issue? Is it that they need certain policy type things from government? You have the opportunity in the e-business roundtable, right? I'm saying somebody has to deal with this, right? The entrepreneurs have been fighting for 20 years, and it has to come from somewhere within the establishment. Start with the banks and let the banks point out why it is for 20 years they haven't been able to deal with this to a satisfactory.
Well, let's start with the bank.
So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to end my comment to allow Glynis to segue in, right? So the reality is a lot of things have happened over the 20 years. The challenge, I think, is how you access what has happened, right? So the technology exists for e-commerce. So we have the systems right now in the local banking system for you to have a website and to accept payments on that website, right? Challenges, and I smile again with my colleagues' comments, is what we would ask you for to open your account, right? And what we would ask you for is the compliance requirements, right? And I wish they didn't exist because it would make our lives a lot easier from an administrative point of view, but it's unavoidable, right? So the technology does exist. Right, so I'm going to end also by allow Glynis to comment, only because I know there's a couple of things that we are doing on the links at the debit card side, which the market isn't aware of as yet. So just to give a sense, so there is, I think in your presentation you talked about debit cards being able to be used internationally, right? Right. We're going in that direction. Glynis made a comment which is important for you to understand and register in her opening comments, in that it comes at a cost, right? Because it is not just the card, it is the system that goes behind that card and how we connect that system to the rest of the world. So the technology does exist, right? And the services currently exist right now. I think the difficulty right now, I think, is opening the accounts to access the service, etc. Right? So.
Right. So Nigel also brought up the point about policy and what is the e-business working with government. We've been doing this, we've been having this conversation with government for as long as I've been on the e-business roundtable, which is 10 years now, right? Again, as you could quite appreciate, things happen very slowly. So we have the policy, we have the legislation, okay? Because those are some of the ingredients for consumer protection, which is another big thing that we can't lose sight of. Because at the end of the day, when funds flow across a payment system, you want to make sure it's going where it's supposed to go and not being siphoned somewhere else, which is what we are suffering from greatly. And a lot of the work the banks have been doing with international networks and like ourselves is about trying to mitigate those risks. Because as far as you plug one hole, another one open up, right? So a lot of the background work, which again comes at a great cost, but we had to do it because we had to protect the consumer and protect the stability of the economies. Because if it's one thing you cannot lose sight of is the integrity of your financial system. And when we talk about the regulators, they have been getting very good at getting us up to scratch within the regulations to protect the financial systems. So that's one. The policy element, again, a little slow. You can appreciate when you see how our parliamentarians work, how slow the legislation has been to get moving. In Trinidad, we have quite a few acts pending. It took us forever to get the Exchequer Adjustment Act. At least 8 years in the making. It came through in, I think, 2014. But it's around since before I was even involved in e-business in 2007. We have the Cybercrime Act, right, which is supposed to take over from the Computer Misuse Act of 2000. We're in 2017. That Cybercrime Act, not anywhere close to passing yet. Probably what should happen in 2017, I would hope. But a lot of those things are some of the ingredients that are keeping us back. And I want to talk about collaboration and economies of scale and leverage. The entrepreneurs in the Caribbean need to cluster more because they need to have a bigger voice. You need to negotiate in terms of size. We are small economies, but we really have to be better at negotiating. So Robert spoke about all the payment avenues that they were trying to use. They come at a significant cost, 5%. If you're selling 100 million products at $1, 5%, the Amazon and the likes of them can afford. But when our local entrepreneurs selling 500, 5% is your profit. So I would like to encourage the entrepreneurs and persons who touch with the entrepreneurs, the young bright guys who are up and coming, and even the not so young guys who are there fighting the good fight. They need to cluster because they need to come with a voice to negotiate with the banks, right? Because there's power in numbers. And also as they work with international gateways to get that 5.5% down, you need to come in numbers because volume is where it's at, right? So that's some of the takeaways I would like us to take away as well with this, that we need to cluster more in terms of in the ITC sector and in other various sectors, whether it's food and beverage, etc., as entrepreneurs, to be able to bring the pricing down so you would have more profit to reinvest into your businesses.
All right. We're going to have to close the session. Our next presenter is remote and he has a cutoff time. But I know this was a session that would attract great interest. But I believe we've set the tone for the conference. A lot of the things, there's a need, entrepreneurs have a need, and we have to be responsive to that need. A lot of the issues that we're going to cover over the course of this conference has been highlighted here. Issues like compliance, risk controls, these things are necessary, and we're gonna cover these issues. Crowdfunding, alternate financing, we're gonna cover these issues. VCs, funding, credit, we're gonna cover these issues. So I really like to thank the panel for their time. I'd like to thank the audience. Thank you.